So this is Dovetail Train Simulator 2022. This is the official website. And they have the button here to get it on Steam because that's one of the easiest ways to get it. All the additions, all the downloadable content. They're not being completely honest about what you get out of a basic install because they are talking here about the Northeast Corridor, which is not included with the basic version, and various French and German routes which are not included, and the Birmingham Cross-City line also, which is featured, of course, in OpenBVE as well. And I actually have that demonstrated in another YouTube video. Not to say this stuff doesn't exist, but it's downloadable content largely. The basic version is pretty sparse, although it's still a lot of fun. That's actually the version that I'll demonstrate in this video. And I think in the future I might actually download some of this downloadable content because it looks really nice. And now that I know I have a computer that will run this, unlike when I tried to do Train Simulator 2017 a few years ago, I don't really have any concerns about wasting money, necessarily. The version I have is actually in my possession because I bought Train Simulator 2014. When I did the 2017 video, it was a similar deal. They had updated my Steam account with the new version automatically, which was a problem at the time because my computer couldn't run 2017. And so my video for that was sort of a failure. But this version runs on my computer, so no objections for the time being. And this is the Steam page, and it includes all of this downloadable content and special editions, and I think I might get some of this. I can't really decide. It's a little bit hard to make a choice. There's no way I would afford all of this. I'd easily spend thousands of dollars. Look at all that. I mean, each item is relatively cheap, but if you add all of this up, it's impossibly expensive. And in this way, there is a disadvantage to getting this as opposed to getting the original Microsoft Train Simulator, because even back in the old days, most of the content for Microsoft Train Simulator was free. So you're getting an amazingly beautiful simulator and game if you get Train Simulator 2022. Unfortunately, when I demonstrate it, I'm not going to have the graphics cranked up this high because the compromise is the reason I'm able to run it on my computer is that I've turned the graphics down. So it looks a lot more like Trains 2009 or Trains 12. So nice, basically better than the original Microsoft Train Simulator, but not as nice as what you're seeing in these screenshots. It would be nice if I had a really powerful computer to make it look this nice, but I don't, unfortunately. Now, a few clarifications. Here's Train Sim World, made by the same company, by Dovetail, and these graphics are spectacular in every screenshot I've ever seen of it. I'm going to have to see if I can make a video of this. I would like to do a video of this too, because I do have it. I was able to get a huge discount on it, which is often the way things are on Steam. It's maybe the main advantage of having it, other than the availability of almost any game. So this will be for the future, but it probably was intended as a replacement for Train Simulator originally, but as you might not be able to tell from looking at this, Train Simulator 2022 is actually a newer game. So they continue to upgrade the original Train Simulator while also developing Train Sim World, which is more of a virtual reality or virtual world type of experience where you walk around in the stations and so on. That will be interesting to check out, certainly, if I can get it to run. If I can get it to run. We'll see about that. Now, you might say, well, this is a ripoff on Microsoft Train Simulator. This has nothing to do with Microsoft Train Simulator. It's not completely true. This is the Wikipedia page for Microsoft Train Simulator. Microsoft Train Simulator was originally released in 2001, and I remember following the development of it very closely because it came very shortly after Train Master 4, which was unlike anything that had come before it. It was a combination of excellent physics and graphics which were state-of-the-art for the time. Microsoft Train Simulator did not have the same quality of physics, everybody agreed, and there were even some glaring mistakes in it. However, the graphics were pretty good also. Maybe better than Train Master, even though it didn't seem that way so much at the time. When you think about all the views that you could get from different angles, it didn't look as nice as this picture on the box. This is actually nicer than what the real thing looked like, but it still was very nice. And I've done another video on it, which you may have seen. When you consider it's from 2001, not bad at all, right? It's very, very good for basically 20 years ago. I was going to say 19 years ago. It's really 20 years ago at this point. Now, it also stayed in production long after it was supposed to be replaced. Now, the story behind that is Kuju Entertainment, who are the actual developers, because Microsoft were only the publisher. They contracted out to Kuju. Kuju were going to continue the series with Train Simulator 2. And Train Simulator 2 was really cool. I got a chance to play it because it was used as the back end for the Intercity 125 simulator in the British National Railway Museum in York. And it was really good. The graphics were great, the physics were great, the sound was great, everything was great. And they also had better scenery in it too. I mean, it was a matter of what they bothered to model. Like, for example, if you were near a road, there would be cars driving up and down the road, which wasn't usually the case with the original Microsoft Train Simulator. You could get add-ons, there were tons of add-ons. As I said earlier, they were free for the most part. So it was, a nice game, but Train Sim 2 was going to be the next generation. Now, there were complications at Microsoft, however. Microsoft wanted to get rid of their Aces game studio and all their simulations, even though they had the most popular flight simulator in the world, in Microsoft Flight Simulator. And this train simulator was basically the definitive train simulator by the time Microsoft decided to get rid of it. And note, by the way, that basically Train Simulator 2 was announced in 2003, which was around the time I played it, actually. And I think I actually played Train Sim for the first and only time in 2004, I think, actually. And by 2007, they were thinking about getting rid of it. By 2009, as you can see, they were getting rid of it entirely. And they completely botched what they were going to do with Flight Simulator. They seemed to have no idea what they were doing. And this is a notorious mistake in the history of Microsoft. And since they've gone back on it, they've brought back Flight Simulator, not Train Simulator, because I'll explain that next. But the new Microsoft Flight Simulator is quite good. And I'm thinking of maybe doing a video on it. We'll see if I get around to it. I am a Flight Simulator fan also. So anyway, Train Simulator 2, they have a dedicated website to it here. And, they made 2 attempts. The first attempt was the one where I got to try it. The second attempt, well, that was an even bigger failure. But eventually what happened was that Kuju first ended up working with Electronic Arts, and then they ended up with a company called Dovetail. But Dovetail did not take over the Train Sim 2 project immediately. Electronic Arts actually did. They started out with a game called Rail Simulator, which was a pretty good simulator, in cooperation with Kuju. And originally it was developed by Kuju and released by Electronic Arts. So not Microsoft anymore, not branded as Train Simulator, even though it had the code of Train Sim 2. What happened is that basically Kuju finished development and disbanded their RailSim team. And as they're saying, knowing the potential of the RailSim engine and with backing from Fun for Games, who owned the rights to the simulator, a new company was set up from some of the core members of the initial development team with the specific aim of fulfilling continued development of the brand and so on and so forth. Now, Railworks, which is what the modern train simulator is built on, is basically at least 3 generations on. So you have Train Sim 2, you have Rail Simulator, then you have Railworks. And actually, if you install Train Simulator today, Dovetail Train Simulator, from Steam, your game folder is still called Railworks because it's based on Railworks. It's just heavily updated. The original version of Railworks, of course, was released in 2009. I got the 2014 edition of Train Simulator originally, and I'm basically using it for the first time now because, as I said, these are very graphics-intensive games and/or simulators, and they put a pretty heavy demand on your computer. And I'm very happy that I can actually run it now. Now, one other interesting thing I discovered while researching this again for my new video is that the producer, for the modern version of Train Simulator is a guy named Paul Jackson. We can probably find him on the Dovetail website here. He obviously didn't invent it, but he is the producer. Paul Jackson has an Order of the British Empire. And he's probably one of the only people who has an Order of the British Empire for developing video games. Because they're not saying that he did some other thing for Britain. They're just overtly saying that he is a games developer. Where is he? Let's see. Oh no, we don't want live Dovetail games, we want just Dovetail games. Okay, Dovetail games. I don't know why it's on still a live site. Okay. Our people. There he is, Paul Jackson, OBE. He earned an OBE for games development. So, he doesn't say much about the OBE on the Dovetail website, though, other than saying that he's an OBE. But if you look at his Wikipedia page, he originally worked for Electronic Arts, then he got involved with Kuju, and eventually with Train Simulator, but he earned his Order of the British Empire, or OBE, in 2010 for services to the video game industry, which I don't know if I find that funny or not. I think it's kind of surprising that he got an OBE for video games development, but he does very good work, as you will see. So I think I will move on now to actually demonstrating the game. So we start with the really second splash screen here, and then we move on to the main menu. And there are a whole bunch of things you can do with the modern version of Dovetail Train Simulator, which is nothing new really. If you watched my video about 2017, you know that it's based around a career, so they try to record your achievements. I don't know what 42 scenarios I've failed. It says I completed 42 also. I have no idea what that means. I think maybe that's a bug, possibly. I don't even know if I played 42 scenarios exactly. But you can see my achievement there for Steam. And for some reason they only say I have that locomotive. In reality I have many more than this, so I think this is also a bug. I have all the ones from the default game. And of course the routes are correct. These are the default routes. I have the US Loco and Asset Pack. Forgotten when I got that, actually. So this is not necessarily bone stock as an installation, unless that came with it. Then, of course, you can build if you want to. They mostly mean build routes, and you can build off of the existing routes. I haven't tried this editor. I can't decide if I'm really good enough to do routes for something as impressive as Dovetail Train Simulator. I've done a lot of graphics over the years, if you've seen my YouTube videos about that, but I don't know if I'm really this good. It would be an interesting way of challenging myself. And, of course, the scenarios are really the main thing that people build. And you can publish to Steam, of course, the Steam Workshop. I don't think I would do that. I would think probably I would only be interested in doing that for myself. But also, of course, there's the Academy, which you saw in the video I did on Train Sim 2017. And now I have done all the lessons, as you can see. I wanted to do all of them before I did this video because I didn't want to make a complete fool of myself. I wanted to know exactly how the simulator worked, even though I've tried countless other train simulators, as you've seen from my videos. And the store I'm going to skip, Dovetail Live I'm going to skip. I'm just going to go to the drive screen, and you have various choices. You have the quick drive, which is just basically point-to-point, very, very crude. I have not figured out a way to add intermediate stops either. There might be a way. I'm thinking of doing exactly this for the playthrough. So then there are the career scenarios to advance your virtual railroad career, I suppose. And these are pretty high difficulty, as you can see over on the right there. A lot of complicated freight work and all kinds of challenges. And then there are these workshop scenarios, and there are hundreds of these, because people have built hundreds of these just for the 3 default routes. And then there are the standard scenarios, which don't actually include the German ones, which I don't like. I like the German track, you know, the one that they give you from Hanover to Hamburg. And free roam, you can only do this on the Donner Pass route. I've actually seen the Donner Pass route in real life. I've never ridden on it, but they have a nice selection of Southern Pacific locomotives here to go with the Donner Pass, ranging from the GP9. These were introduced in 1954 and basically ran until the 1990s, although there are still a few left. And I'm going to set up an easy, very short suburban train from Hamburg Hauptbahnhof to Harburg, because Harburg is the next mainline station, which is not a Stadtbahn station, and I don't want to do the Stadtbahn route because it's too short, and you can only do point-to-point, so I could only do the first Stadtbahn station out, which I don't want to do. I want to do a slightly longer playthrough than that, even though this is going to be very short. It's going to be nowhere close to the full route. I have driven the full route already, and it's very enjoyable, because it's snowing outside today, as far as I know, and it's winter weather. I'm going to make this scenario a snowy one. The graphics will not be as good as Train Simulator can provide, because I'm holding back the simulator so that my computer doesn't choke on it. So it will look more like, I don't know, Oron trains, old Oron trains, in terms of graphics quality. Which is to say, perfectly okay, just not as amazing as it can be. Naturally, this is a... Well, when Dovetail Train Simulator is at its best, it looks like this, as you're seeing here, and better. There are all these splash screens of the different add-on routes you can get. So you got crocodiles there. And if you look at the bottom of the screen, it tells you which scenario it is. This is actually supposed to be in China. I didn't initially think that, but then I looked down on the bottom and wow, it's a Chinese route. And there's a Big Boy, of course. I don't know if the Big Boy and the Sherman Hill route come together, but they're certainly meant to go together, because the Big Boy's only operated on Sherman Hill. Can't decide if I want it yet. So, none of these trains, unfortunately, come with the default game, or simulator, or what have you. You need to buy all this stuff, which is one of the downsides of Dovetail Train Simulator. If there is one, it is kind of expensive. And so here we are in Hamburg Hauptbahnhof, and it's snowing, and I have a 101 class and 6 Intercity coaches, which is not really a realistic consist for a local, but it's all you have in the default version. So we'll switch on the wipers here. I switched on the headlights earlier. We put the reverser in forward, release the brakes, which are set for blended, basically. The default setting for this scenario. I've edged out the throttle to pull the slack out, and in spite of the wet rails, we are starting to move. It's running a little bit better than on my dry run, which is, I think, because I only have 6 coaches on. When I did my practice run, I had 8. So under these conditions, even with a passenger train, the wet rails can be a little bit of a challenge. And this is a simulator. This is not simply some game. So even though they insist it's not realistic and you shouldn't use it for training, I think their lawyers told them to say that, because the physics are actually very good. And if you have wet rails in Dovetail Train Simulator, it's a lot like having wet rails in real life. You will have to struggle a little bit more. So I've moved the camera view down a little bit. You can see that I have the CIFA button there, but if I click it, nothing happens. CIFA is not activated by default in this scenario, although it does exist in Dovetail Train Simulator. A lot of very sophisticated real-life systems are simulated, including CIFA. The alerter for the signals, for the LZB cab signaling system, is enabled by default in this scenario, but we're not going to use it because we're not going to get into LZB territory before the end of the scenario. So here, the speed limit just went up to 60k, and it's about to go up to 80k, and I'm easing my speed up here gradually to avoid slipping under the conditions. I don't know if this is really to time, because I don't have a schedule in this quick drive scenario either. It's not really possible to be late. Quick drive is very, very crude as scenarios go, but it's ideal for this video because it doesn't take much setting up. I'm probably not the most efficient driver here. I'm just trying to drive smooth, basically. So, our speed is heading up. One thing I know from my practice, I have to ease off the throttle right about here, because the train's going to roll downhill this way. I'm going to actually have to get on the brake, because otherwise it's going to go over the speed limit. The speed limits on this route, at least in Dovetail Train Simulator, run up to 200 kilometers per hour, although really more of the route is for 160 kilometers per hour. It's not a very fast main line, but it is a main line. In real life, all the non-stops between Hanover and Hamburg, as far as I can tell from checking the timetables, are actually ICEs. So my practice runs with traditional Intercities pulled by Class 101s are either anachronistic or completely inaccurate. I don't know if they ever used them on this route as non-stops. Here we're not doing that, we're only going to Harburg. So, any second the speed limit, yes, the speed limit has gone up to 120 kilometers per hour. So far all the signals have been high green, and I've found that in the quick drive the line is generally open to you. So another high green there. So now we're actually starting to highball properly. .100 kilometers per hour and heading for 120, which is about 75 miles an hour actually. Mainline speed, but not particularly fast by the standards of Germany. So there's the first of the stop bond stations, Vedel. Because I can't set up intermediate stops, we can't stop there. The next one is Wilhelmsburg, which also is a stop bond station and also one we can't really stop at. Now the speed limit is up to 160 kilometers per hour, or 99 miles an hour, and that's as fast as we're going to go on this playthrough. I didn't want to make this very long. I think I might bore you if I take the whole route just for my first playthrough. I might do a long play where I do the whole route, though, because I really, really like this particular route. I figured out that I probably haven't ridden it in real life, I don't think, but I have been to Hamburg before. Coming from Berlin, not from Hanover. So I'm having to ease off the throttle already here because I'm getting close to the speed limit. A lot of this is really realistic, like the way the cab lurches around, the way the droplets of rain land on the windshield. So even with the graphics turned down, I think the graphics for this simulator are very nice, even when everything's turned down. Now already we see a 100 kilometers per hour speed restriction coming up because there are some bridges down here with that restriction. Speed limit goes right up after you get past the bridge, but we're going to be coming to Harburg Station, so I'm going to have to brake for Harburg. There's the advanced speed sign for 100 kilometers per hour. There's another train. The traffic is simulated. I don't know how authentic it is, but even in Quick Drive you get all these services, ICEs, Intercities, probably some that are intended to be locals, as well as freights. It's very nicely done. Now we're actually under 100 kilometers per hour. Not by a whole lot, but by enough to be well within the limit on this bridge. And now we're going to have to figure out how to bring the train to a smooth stop in Harburg. So I still have green signals because the line is open to me. And we can't get a visual on the station yet because of all the snow. It's not that far away, but visibility is limited. Another green signal, in spite of the fact that we're coming up to our stop. So I better start to brake, because if I don't, I could overshoot the platform. That was my most serious mistake in the practice runs, is I would overshoot the stations. I think in real life that would result in loss of license and termination, I think. Because it also involved, at least with two of those, it involved a SPAD at the end. I'm just out of practice with this stuff. Luckily, it's just a simulator. So here, I'm actually braking a lot better, let's say. Looks like I'm going to spot the train pretty much where it should be. Maybe a little bit too far down the platform for a local, but certainly not overshooting it. It looks like we're going to pull to a stop at location A4 here. And it makes us wait for the unloading of the passengers, even though no passengers were actually loaded, as you'll see from the summary at the end of the run. It does score you, in spite of it being the quick drive and not having a lot of the features enabled. Well done, you have reached the end of this quick drive scenario. So we go to our debriefing. And nothing much happened, of course. For some reason it's given me credit for 4 locomotives, even though I only drove 1. I'm not sure what's up with that. We drove 20 miles, or 33 kilometers. And no mistakes are listed. Normally, if you have mistakes, they get listed in the debriefing. But I didn't make any technical mistakes, at least by the standards of Dovetail Train Simulator. So that's nice to know. So we jump back to the main menu. Thanks for watching. Hopefully I'll do something more in the future.